I was 32 years old when I learned that silence can be rehearsed. Not accidental silence. Not awkward silence. But coordinated silence, the kind that requires planning, eye contact, and agreement. The kind that needs more than one person to hold it together. I didn't know that yet when I packed my overnight bag on a Friday afternoon, folding my clothes neatly like I always did when I believed I was coming back to a place that still belonged to me. My apartment smelled like lemon cleaner and warm fabric from the dryer. Sunlight came in through the living room window at an angle that made everything look softer than it really was. I remember thinking that my life looked calm from the outside, like one of those still frames people post online when they want to prove they're doing okay. I wasn't doing okay. But I didn't know why yet. My boyfriend Andre had texted me earlier that morning saying he wouldn't be able to see me all weekend. He said his mother needed help at the house. He said there were family things going on. He said it was nothing bad, just overwhelming. Andre always sounded responsible when he talked about his family. Oldest son energy. The kind of man who said things like somebody has to show up and meant it. I told him I understood. I always understood. That was the problem. I was supposed to spend the weekend alone. Catch up on sleep. Maybe visit my sister. Reset before another long week at the nonprofit where I worked. Coordinating community programs and pretending burnout was just tiredness that a good night's rest could fix. But around noon, my cousin Tasha called me. She asked what I was wearing to the cabin. The word didn't register at first. I asked her what cabin. She laughed and said the family cabin. She said Andre's people rented it every fall. She said she assumed I already knew since Andre was hosting this year. Hosting. My stomach dropped so suddenly I had to sit down on the edge of my bed. I told her she must be mistaken. She paused. Her voice shifted. Careful now. She said Andre had invited everyone weeks ago. She said the group chat had been active for days. She said his sisters were already posting countdown photos. I told her Andre said he was helping his mother this weekend. There was silence on the line. Then she said my name slowly. She said that wasn't what she'd heard. After we hung up, I sat very still. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I opened social media. That was my first mistake. Photos loaded slowly, one after another, like the truth taking its time to hurt me. A wooded driveway. Suitcases lined up by a porch. Smiling faces wrapped in scarves and sweaters. A fire pit. Wine glasses. A long wooden table already set. Andre was there. Not alone. He stood between his sister and a woman I had never seen before. His arm rested casually at the woman's lower back. Familiar. Comfortable. Possessive. The caption said finally all together. My hands started to shake. I zoomed in. The woman was beautiful. Soft brown skin. Natural curls pulled into a low puff. Calm smile. The kind of face that looked like she belonged wherever she stood. I didn't know her. But everyone else seemed to. I scrolled further. More photos. Different angles. Same closeness. Then a comment from Andre's mother. She said, "So happy to have you here." Not you all. You. Singular. I put the phone down like it had burned me. The room felt too quiet, like the walls were listening. Andre hadn't told me about the cabin. Andre hadn't told me about her. Andre hadn't told me about the weekend everyone else knew about. I told myself there had to be an explanation. I told myself families miscommunicate all the time. I told myself I was jumping to conclusions. But my chest felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with anxiety and everything to do with recognition. This wasn't a surprise. This was exclusion. I picked up my phone and texted Andre, asking how his mother was doing. He responded quickly, saying she was tired but okay. He said he was running errands for her. He said the house was chaos. I stared at the message. I asked if he was out of town. He said no. That was a lie. I could see the mountains behind him in the photos. I didn't confront him yet. Instead, I packed my bag back up. Not to go to the cabin. To go to my sister's place. I needed to be somewhere that didn't feel like it was closing in on me. On the drive over, memories started lining up in my mind like witnesses finally ready to speak. The times Andre took calls outside. The way his phone was always face down. The sudden privacy around family events. I had noticed these things before. I had chosen softness instead of suspicion. By the time I reached my sister's apartment, my heart felt bruised. She opened the door and took one look at my face. She didn't ask questions. She just hugged me. That night, after I explained everything, she said something that stuck to my bones. She said people don't forget to tell you things that matter. They decide not to. I lay awake on her couch, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly above me. I thought about how Andre always said he valued honesty. I thought about how easy it had been for him to live this weekend without me. I thought about how many people had smiled at him knowing I wasn't there. And for the first time, I wondered if I wasn't missing from his life. I was being replaced. By morning, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to show up angry. I was going to show up informed. Because whatever was happening at that cabin didn't start this weekend. It was just the first time I'd been locked out of it. And I intended to walk straight back in. I woke up early the next morning on my sister's couch, the light creeping in through the blinds in thin, uneven lines. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then my phone buzzed, and my body remembered before my mind could catch up. A notification. Not from Andre. From a woman whose name I did not recognize. She had sent me a follow request on Instagram sometime after midnight. I hadn't seen it until now. Her profile picture showed her standing in front of a lake, wrapped in a thick sweater, hair pulled back loosely, smiling like the world had never disappointed her. The background looked familiar. Too familiar. The same trees. The same water. The same cabin dock I had just seen in Andre's family photos. My mouth went dry. I opened her profile. Public. Too public for someone hiding. Her name was Leona. She had photos going back years. Birthdays. Friends. Family gatherings. Holiday dinners. And threaded through all of it, subtly but consistently, was Andre. Not tagged. Not centered. But present. An arm at the edge of a frame. A reflection in a mirror. A familiar watch resting on a table. He had been there longer than I had. My heart started to race, not wildly, but steadily, like it was preparing for impact. Before I could decide whether to accept the request, another notification appeared. A message. She said my name. Seeing it written by someone I had never met felt invasive, like she'd reached into a space she wasn't supposed to know existed. She said she hoped I wouldn't be upset with her for reaching out. She said she didn't know how else to handle this. She said she thought it was time we talked. I sat up, pulling the blanket tighter around myself, grounding my feet against the floor. I asked how she knew my name. She replied almost immediately. She said Andre talked about me. She said he talked about me a lot. That sentence landed in my chest with a dull ache. I asked her what exactly he said. There was a pause. Long enough for my mind to start filling the silence with worst-case scenarios. Then she responded. She said Andre said I was his girlfriend. She said he told her we'd been together for years. She said he said things between us were complicated. That we were comfortable but not aligned anymore. That I wanted marriage and he wasn't sure. I closed my eyes. He had made me sound like an obstacle. A phase he was outgrowing. She said he told her the weekend cabin trip was supposed to be their reset. That he wanted to introduce her properly. That his family already knew about her. That part hurt in a way that surprised me. Not because he'd introduced her, but because he'd erased me so thoroughly. I asked her why she was telling me this now. She said because she hadn't known he was still lying to me. She said she thought I already knew. That sentence hollowed me out. She said she found my social media through his old tagged photos. She said she'd been scrolling through comments, reading how his mother and sisters interacted with me online. She said things didn't add up. She said she asked him directly if he was still with me. She said he told her no. She said she believed him. Until that morning. I asked what changed that morning. She said she saw him texting someone under the covers while he thought she was asleep. She said she recognized my name when it lit up his screen. I stared at my phone until the letters blurred. I asked her where Andre was now. She said he'd gone to the store with his brother. She said she was still at the cabin. Still surrounded by people who smiled at her. Still in a space where my absence was treated like a solved problem. I thanked her for telling me. I didn't know what else to say. She said she wasn't asking me to do anything. She said she just wanted me to know the truth. I believed her. Because her messages didn't sound triumphant. They sounded shaken. After we stopped messaging, I sat there in the quiet living room, my sister still asleep in her bedroom, the city just beginning to stir outside. I thought about how many people had known. Andre's sisters. Andre's mother. Andre's cousins. They had watched him bring Leona into that cabin, watched him move through the weekend like he hadn't left someone behind. They had watched him lie with ease. And not one of them had reached out to me. Not until Leona. That was when the betrayal shifted shape. This wasn't just about a man choosing poorly. This was about a system of protection. A family that had decided who belonged and who could be removed quietly. I finally texted Andre. I asked him how the cabin was. He said it was cold but nice. He said he wished I were there. I stared at that lie. I asked who Leona was. There it was. The longest pause yet. Minutes passed. I imagined him seeing my message, feeling the ground tilt under his feet, scrambling to decide which version of the truth to serve. Finally, he replied. He said she was a friend. I told him I knew better. I told him she had reached out to me. Another pause. Then a flood. He said it wasn't what it looked like. He said he'd been meaning to talk to me. He said things had gotten confusing. He said his family had pressured him. I stopped reading halfway through. I told him I was coming to the cabin. He said that wasn't a good idea. That told me everything. I packed my bag again. This time, with intention. I wasn't going to show up screaming or demanding answers. I was going to show up present. Because I had learned something important. They had been comfortable lying because they thought I would stay quiet. They had mistaken my patience for passivity. By the time my sister woke up and asked what I was doing, my mind was clear in a way it hadn't been in days. I told her I was going to confront something I had been excluded from. She asked if I was safe. I told her I didn't know. But I knew I couldn't sit still anymore. As I drove toward the cabin, trees lining the road like witnesses, my chest felt heavy but steady. I thought about all the times I'd made space for Andre's family. All the holidays. All the compromises. All the understanding. I wondered how easy it must have been for them to erase me. And I wondered how shocked they would be when I walked back into the story they thought they had rewritten. The road narrowed the closer I got to the cabin. Trees pressed in on both sides, tall and quiet, their branches arching overhead like they were watching me pass. My GPS lost signal a mile out, the screen freezing just as the road curved sharply to the left. I didn't need it anymore. I recognized the turn from the photos. The gravel shoulder. The leaning wooden sign with the cabin's name burned into it. I slowed my car, my hand steady on the wheel in a way that surprised me. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't panicking. I felt something colder. More focused. The cabin sat back from the road, wide and dark-stained, with a wraparound porch and smoke drifting lazily from a chimney. Several cars were parked out front. Andre's car was there, unmistakable, backed in like he always did. I parked last, deliberately, my tires crunching loudly over the gravel. The sound carried. I wanted it to. I sat for a moment before getting out, breathing in the crisp air, letting the smell of pine and damp earth ground me. This place was supposed to feel peaceful. Restorative. Instead, it felt staged, like a set built to support a lie. When I stepped onto the porch, the noise inside was immediate. Laughter. Music low in the background. The clink of glasses. Comfort. Familiar comfort. I opened the door without knocking. The room went quiet in waves. Not all at once. That would have been too honest. Conversation stumbled, then slowed, then stopped as people noticed me one by one. Heads turned. Smiles faltered. Someone cleared their throat. The music kept playing for a few seconds longer than it should have, until Andre's sister reached over and turned it off. Andre stood near the fireplace. He looked at me like he'd seen a ghost. Not angry. Not relieved. Exposed. Leona was beside him. Close enough that their shoulders brushed. Her face drained of color when she saw me, but she didn't look away. She straightened, her posture shifting from guest to witness. Andre's mother was seated on the couch, a mug in her hands. When she saw me, her lips pressed together tightly. Her eyes flicked to Andre, then back to me. No surprise. That hurt more than anything else so far. Andre said my name, low, like he was trying not to disturb something fragile. I said hello. My voice didn't shake. I said it like I belonged there. Because I did. No one answered. The silence felt heavy, practiced. I looked around the room. His sisters. His cousins. People who had eaten at my table. People who had hugged me at holidays, called me family, told me they were happy for us. They wouldn't meet my eyes. That's when I understood. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an agreement. I asked Andre if we could talk. He nodded too quickly, already moving toward the back door like he wanted to get me away from everyone else, contain the damage. I followed him out onto the porch instead, where the cold air hit my face and cleared whatever softness I might have had left. I told him I knew about Leona. I told him I knew this weekend wasn't about his mother. I told him I knew his family had known. He ran a hand over his face and said my name again, like it was a shield. He said it had gotten complicated. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was insulting. I asked him when he planned to tell me. He said he was waiting for the right time. I asked him when the right time would have been. After the wedding? After kids? After I had reorganized my whole life around a man who couldn't even give me the courtesy of the truth? He said he didn't want to hurt me. That was when Leona stepped forward. She said that wasn't fair. She said Andre had told her he was ending things with me. She said she had believed him. She said she wouldn't have come if she'd known. Andre snapped her name sharply, warning. I looked at her. I told her I believed her. Andre stared at me, shocked, like he'd expected me to turn on her instead. That was another thing he'd miscalculated. I turned back to him. I asked him how long his family had known. He hesitated. Too long. His mother stood then, slowly, placing her mug down on the table with deliberate care. She said I didn't need to drag everyone into this. She said Andre had been under a lot of pressure. She said relationships were complicated. I looked at her. I asked her when she stopped seeing me as someone worth protecting. Her jaw tightened. She said she hadn't meant to hurt me. She said she assumed Andre would handle it. Handle it. That was the phrase they all used. As if the truth was a mess to be cleaned up quietly. I told her I had sat at her kitchen table and listened to her talk about honesty and respect. I told her she'd hugged me and called me her daughter. I told her I had trusted her. Her eyes finally dropped. No apology came. That told me everything I needed to know. I reached into my coat pocket and took out my phone. I pulled up the photo of Andre and me from last Christmas, standing in front of our tree, his arm around my waist, both of us smiling. I showed it to Leona. I told her that was taken 2 months ago. She inhaled sharply. Andre swore under his breath. I told Andre I was done. Not quietly. Not eventually. Done. I told him he didn't get to keep me in reserve while he tested a new future. I told him I wasn't a placeholder. I told him I was leaving, and I wasn't taking my silence with me. I took off the necklace he'd given me last year, the one his mother had helped him pick out. I placed it on the table inside, right in front of everyone. I said I hoped the cabin was worth it. Then I walked out. No one followed me. That hurt too. But as I drove away, the road opening back up in front of me, something inside my chest loosened. They had chosen their comfort over my dignity. And I had finally chosen myself over all of them. I didn't cry when I got back to my sister's apartment. That surprised me. I expected tears. The kind that shake your chest and leave your eyes swollen for days. I expected grief to rush in once the adrenaline wore off. Instead, what settled over me was something quieter and heavier. Relief. Not the clean, joyful kind. The exhausted kind that comes after you finally stop carrying something that was never yours to begin with. I slept for nearly 12 hours. When I woke up, the sun was already low, pouring amber light through the living room window. My phone lay face down on the coffee table. I hadn't checked it since leaving the cabin. I didn't need to. I already knew what would be there. Missed calls. Messages layered with apology and explanation. People trying to manage the aftermath now that silence had failed. I made coffee and sat alone at the table, listening to the familiar sounds of my sister moving around in her room. The ordinary rhythm of life continued, indifferent to the way mine had cracked open. Eventually, I picked up my phone. Andre had called 8 times. He had sent paragraphs. Long ones. Careful ones. The kind written by someone who finally understood the cost but still hoped to negotiate it down. He said he never meant for it to happen like this. He said he loved me. He said he panicked. He said he didn't want to lose me. What he never said was I was wrong. What he never said was I imagined it. That told me he knew exactly what he had done. There were messages from his sisters too. One said she hated how things turned out. Another said families get messy sometimes. Another said she hoped I could forgive Andre eventually. None of them said they were sorry for lying to my face. None of them said they should have warned me. Forgiveness, apparently, was something they expected from me. Accountability was something they reserved for private conversations I was no longer part of. I didn't respond. That silence was mine now. Over the next few weeks, my life rearranged itself slowly, like furniture being moved out of a room one piece at a time. I went back to my apartment and packed everything that belonged to me. Andre wasn't there. He had gone to stay with his brother. The space felt hollow, stripped of warmth, like the illusion had been carrying more weight than the walls. I boxed up memories carefully. Not because they were precious, but because they were heavy. I needed to know exactly what I was letting go of. I found photos tucked into books. Notes in drawers. Receipts from trips I now understood differently. I didn't tear anything up. I didn't need the drama. I just needed it gone. I moved into a smaller place across town. 1 bedroom. Big windows. Quiet neighbors. No shared history in the walls. The first night there, I slept with the windows open, city air moving through the room, reminding me that the world was bigger than the narrow story I had almost stayed inside. Therapy helped. Not because it fixed me, but because it named things. My therapist said betrayal hurts deeper when it's communal. When it's not just one person who lies, but a network that benefits from your absence. She said being excluded can hurt more than being rejected, because exclusion tells you people discussed you and still chose silence. That hit. I thought about the cabin again. The way everyone avoided my eyes. The practiced quiet. The comfort they had built around my removal. They hadn't hated me. They had just decided I was expendable. Understanding that didn't make it hurt less. But it made it clearer. Andre and I spoke once more, weeks later, when I felt steady enough to hear his voice without folding. He asked if we could meet. I agreed, not because I wanted closure, but because I wanted confirmation. We met at a coffee shop near my old job. Neutral ground. Public. Bright. He looked smaller somehow. Less certain. He said he'd messed up. He said he was confused. He said he didn't know how to choose. I told him that was the problem. I told him I wasn't supposed to be chosen after a test. I told him love wasn't a competition he got to judge from the sidelines. He asked if I hated him. I told him no. That surprised him. I told him hate would mean he still had power over me. What I felt was clarity. I stood up before he could say anything else. I told him I hoped he learned how to tell the truth before he tried to build another future. I told him not to contact me again. And I meant it. Months passed. The sharpness dulled. The story lost its grip on my body. I stopped replaying conversations in the shower. I stopped wondering how long it had really been going on. I stopped questioning my instincts. Because here was the truth I hadn't wanted to admit before. I had felt it. The distance. The half-answers. The missing invitations. I had felt it and chosen patience instead of honesty with myself. That wasn't a failure. It was a lesson. One I paid for dearly, but one I would never forget. The last time I heard about Andre, he was still with Leona. At least, that's what someone said. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to know how their story unfolded to understand mine. My life became quieter. Not lonely. Intentional. I learned to enjoy weekends without explanations. To make plans without checking someone else's calendar. To rest without guilt. I rebuilt my sense of self without asking anyone else if it made sense. And sometimes, late at night, when the city softened and the noise fell away, I thought about that cabin. Not with anger. But with gratitude. Because it was the place where the truth stopped hiding. Where silence failed. Where I walked into a story that had already erased me and chose not to beg for my place back. I chose something better. A life that didn't require permission.